Hello, and welcome to the Ascendant Art Podcast, where we are on a search for art ascending above the mainstream. This is Mike, your host, here with Joey from Keeper's Cairn and Vinny, the author of the Little Chad comic. How you doing tonight, guys?
Doing fantastic there, Mike.
Pretty
Fantastic.
good. Pretty good. I just realized I didn't change my chat name, but I also go by Slender Dad.
Yes, indeed. The Slender Dad account out on Twitter. Great and fun channel to follow. Yeah, and for this episode, guys, it's going to be tons of fun because we've got Kickstarters we're looking at tonight. We have been looking at a number of different projects going on out in the world of Kickstarter and Indiegogo, including some people we've even had on our show. So in this case, most of the time we've just been doing the background art. This time we're going to be looking at a few campaigns here. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in. All right, so we're going to go through kind of a series of these. And the first one is the same guy who came onto our podcast for episode 3. So this was Journey to the Middle Kingdom. So this is for issue 2, Evil Queen Rules with an Iron Fist. So it seems like he's off to kind of a decent start. He's got some backers, and I've been talking with him a little bit kind of in the background as well. He's been going to cons, he's been going to different podcasts, and it turns out he has been doing some sales outside of this. So between the comics and the merch, I noticed he posted recently that he's had a issue 4 coming out, so he's been able to move forward on the issues. So overall his project is doing well, and we're just kind of like seeing it coming together on the Kickstarter in the same way. You guys remember our friend Jonathan? And yeah, tell me about what y'all are backing.
Well, I definitely did back this one after the conversation. I thought it sounded like a great book. People can go back and listen to that whole podcast episode to get a lot more detail about what's being explored there. What I do think is kind of pertinent to the conversation we're having today is that he's taking a kind of a hybrid approach to how he's doing it, where he's doing live sales at cons and other settings, and then using the crowdfunding through Kickstarter to try to kind of supplement it and use it as a marketing tool as he's promoting his next issues and things like that. So, which is a little different. Some other people we're going to look at today are doing more exclusive crowdfunding models where they don't actually go to someplace physical. So this is kind of a more traditional model from what I'm used to as a comic book collector. For years, you could go to conventions and there would be guys with their independently made books selling it at a table. And what they didn't have before was a online vehicle to kind of promote and get sales throughout the year. They'd have to kind of go through the convention circuit and hope that they would get enough each visit to justify the cost of the table. So that's where you'd see a lot of people sharing tables and things like that to kind of split what they were selling, split the costs so that they wouldn't have to sell as much to get there. So it does remind me with what you were telling me of what I was used to kind of getting from going to conventions for a long time.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that's also one of the interesting thoughts here too for new creators as well, because I'm just thinking about this, just starting to get into it for my comic. That's one of the questions is, okay, like I'm getting close to producing one. So once I produce it, like what do I do next? Because you're like, if you just get on the internet, you just see everyone talking about Kickstarter. But you're right, there was an entire industry that was already thriving before that. And this guy is definitely out there working it in that sense. Now, what is interesting about the these campaign sites, Kickstarter and IGG both, is it does give you kind of like a single page that you can direct a lot of people to, that you don't need to go and put up a whole website for. And it has all the basics already built in there for you, because in the background it's got your analytics. On this side, you can show people all your different products as well as through the different add-ons you can do. So yeah, you're right, it is a very interesting hybrid approach that he's doing here.
Well, there's an interesting thing about that too, in that there's two basic ways for a creator to connect with an audience. You either find your audience or you make it very easy for your audience to find you. And these Kickstarters, they do make it very easy for an audience to find you, but you can't discount going out and finding your audience, because it provides an opportunity to rest on your laurels to a certain degree, right? Like you've got your stuff out there. People can find it if they want it, so you don't put the extra work in. And especially when you're getting started, like a big part of it is you kind of got to go out and find your audience because they're not looking for you yet.
Yes, indeed. And for one of the campaigns we'll be looking at later, I remember one of those authors actually mentioning on a podcast, he said one of the fun challenges when you go out to cons is because you're not a mainstream title, nobody's heard of you. So it's also a test of, is just your pitch and your covers enough to convince people that you've got something good? Also, I can't help but notice here, look at this, guys. Catalytic Comics says, so he put my review on his Kickstarter.
You worded it very well. It's great.
Mhm.
And it comes from the fact that the book is good. I mean,
It is. And just from reading it, just like I said in the review here, it definitely reminds you of kind of the Saturday morning cartoons because there's a little bit of an episodic element to it. But yeah, as you were saying.
And that's and that's great. I mean, this, like I said, I mean, obviously, again, for anybody listening, if they want to have like an entire background on this one, the episode where he was on was a very good deep dive into the content of the book. But what's great is when you actually have, books have been doing it for years. You put the blurb on the back of the book, it helps people feel better about what they're going to be purchasing, right? That somebody somewhere has read it and said something good about it. And it's weird to think about that. But I mean, when you read blurbs on the back of books that you ended up buying, a lot of the times it wasn't blurbs by anybody you knew. It was from like a publication critical like we say website now, or our review journal or something like that. And occasionally it might be an author that you recognize the name of saying this book was great, but most of the time it was just that. But what it did help you, like, oh, somebody says this is really good. So it's something that if you do have it available, to put on your Indiegogo or Kickstarter or crowdfunding page, testimonials, even if they seem abstract to you, do help with customers making a decision to purchase. And I would say that any creator looking at doing a crowdfunding, if they have access to people who have given positive testimonials that have any kind of standing that would make it worthwhile to put up there, whether it's a website that they can be referenced to or they publish books themselves or something, it's definitely something they should have on there.
And it's kind of a phased thing, right? Like the cover is going to get your attention. Yeah, I know, don't judge a book by its cover, but the cover gets your attention. If I see a book that has a cool cover, I'll pull it off the shelf at the store and I'll read the back. The back makes your pitch. If I'm not sold yet, the testimonials are what would theoretically put me over the edge and be like, all right, yeah, I got to pick up this book. Great example. I don't remember what book it was that I grabbed off the shelf, but I had never heard of the writer. The cover got my attention, read the back. It sounded like a kind of interesting premise, but I wasn't there yet. But then it had a testimonial from Terry Brooks. And well, I mean, if Terry Brooks says it's a good book, I'm going to pick it up because, I hero worship that guy.
Absolutely. And so I think just, in summary for this, the guy had a great strategy. I love the episode that we did, but at the same time, I think this project needs some more love. So if you're watching this, definitely go and check out this project here. So again, the account on Kickstarter and on Twitter is JTMK Journey to the Middle Kingdom, and it is the Princess of Yulong. We will definitely put this in the description. And let's go on ahead. Let's take a look at the next one. So this was just, I was out doing some searches for interesting campaigns going on right now. So this one is called Creepsters. To kind of reveal some ignorance here, this is very similar to a movie that you guys educated me on called Critters. So I've got the image search from DuckDuckGo over here. But I know I also thought of the film Gremlins when I was looking at this too. So we've got just a concept built around these apparently cute and fuzzy little creatures that, of course, are little terrors. But again, let's just look at it by the numbers. So they start off with a pretty small, flexible goal. They definitely blew it out, getting a few thousand. And what was interesting here was the combination of comics and then also, right, the merchandise, because this book definitely fits for both of those.
Yeah, and I'm looking at, and this one is sourced on Indiegogo and the project is Creepsters, Creepsters. If you search for it on Indiegogo. But if you look, their initial goal was only $500. And when the goal is that low, it tells me that they already had this ready to go and done and are definitely going to be producing it And the fact that they also have plushes and things like that, either somebody has invested their own money and is ready, believes in it, or they have already been funding this somewhere else, maybe going to conventions or something like that. Or, in this case, it's somebody who's run successful campaigns previously, and it looks like maybe they've kind of channeled in some of their previous income from those into creating this. Because sourcing plushes and things like that does take a little bit of money. So I would think that they've already invested a decent amount into the creation of it. Now, whether it's going to live up to the great achievement in cinematic history that is Critters from 1986, which, if you are old enough to remember, was an epically, fantastically bad but good movie that aired on Saturday afternoons on local basic cable often. So, but it was is great. So I don't know if the book is going to be exactly like that, but the character design is super reminiscent of that, just in the color red instead of the normal Critters furry black and gray colors.
I was gonna say it looks like they had a couple different of these as far as the kind of
That's
the
what I
inspiration
remember
goes.
right there. The critters all combining into the giant ball that just like it rolled over a guy at some point in the movie, and then as it rolled past, there was just like the bloody skeleton left behind.
Of course.
It
Slightly
was super
sidetracked,
cheese.
but it was awesome, right? So it was capitalizing. It was kind of like a more low budget Gremlins ripoff with a couple other horror elements mixed in, like body snatchers, aliens, and all sorts of stuff. And it looks like thematically the Creepers comic is going to be going with that similar vibe, where it's a little like
Not creepers, creepsters.
creepsters.
Creepers are a very different thing.
Well, whatever. Creepsters. Creepsters are going to be like little things that eat anything they can get their hands on. And looking from the photos, it looks like they've already created 50 to 100 of the plushes. So they thought going in that they're going to be successful enough to do it.
Yes, indeed. And this is also another interesting part of this comes in as well. So this is obviously a horror comic. And one thing I thought was interesting about that is, so this is 26 days left. It's currently October 19th is when we're recording this. So we're doing this mid-October. It's obviously going to run through mid-November, because I'm thinking about how this would have to time with Halloween, because that is kind of the horror watching season, right? And so it is kind of interesting that it's going to run over that. At the same time, you're right. Like, they've already met their goal. Maybe they're counting on a whole bunch of sales coming in over this week and next. And when you mentioned about the $500, do you think that also ties into like maybe the algorithm, how that works?
Oh, wait. You're looking here and it says early bird, $100, estimated shipping October 2022. So
That's interesting.
you'll get it next October?
Dude,
That's what it
that
looks
is-
like. There you go. That, which is not uncommon for a crowdfunder. I mean, a lot of these things can take a good long time to finish. I think it's actually nice that one of them, that possibly this is because they're giving themselves enough time to actually publish and print and ship on time. One of the big negative things that comes up with crowdfunding, especially in the comic book realm, is the delays. Like, people will put that
We had a
be,
whole conversation about that last week.
yeah, the shipping delays, right? And so being on time, or at least reasonably on time with your books, helps build your audience. And I think if this in the creator on posting this one is being more realistic about how long it's going to actually take to produce and ship out, and maybe possibly even send it out early if he can do it, that could be a good place for goodwill. What is also interesting about this crowdfunding is it's opening up another conversation point which we can have, which is the idea about adding merchandise into your content crowdfunding. In this case, it's a comic book, but the person running this one is selling plushies, wristbands, pins as add-ons or individual purchases. And it's a pretty interesting debate to have, to see whether you think that's a benefit or not, because on the one hand, bundling in other things that people can add on that when you print or make in volume is very low cost for you as a creator, but can add value at a reasonable upcharge, is very good for increasing your money that you've intake. but I think it can sometimes lead to confusion and, like, do I want this? Is it really necessary? Like, and then you got to, produce and make it. So I don't know what you guys think about that as a concept.
I was going to say the other thing I'm paying attention to as well as we go through this is the price per issue as well as the number of pages. So we also see Creepsters #1, so it's $25 for the issue. Let's see, 86 page black and white book. So that's really 86 pages. I mean, that's a graphic novel. So we're gonna see a whole range of prices as we go through this, but it's just something I'm just noticing as we're going through here. But the other part of it too is like that's a really long shipping date. So I wonder like how that works for them. It looks like this author has Nasser Abadi. So it says 8 campaigns. So it looks like he's done some campaigns before. Yeah, definitely want one to watch to like see how that goes once they finish up on orders and work on fulfillment after that. But I did like what you said earlier though about the likely possibility that with that long of a time frame, they may be intending to ship early.
The thing to look at is it's a black and white book, meaning without having to color a comic, you're saving time. You can produce it at a quicker rate. I mean, goes back to indie comic books, from when comic books started. Doing something in black and white makes the creation time a lot quicker. The most famous independent comic book that anybody has ever heard of that doesn't realize it was an independent comic book is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. When that one was produced, it was a black and white comic because it was much easier and cheaper to do, and they could get it out into the stores. And obviously, we're all familiar with what that became, but it's something where you're paying $25 for this book. And at the one hand, you're saying, oh, it's 86 pages. That's a great value for $25 when if you go to a comic book store or Barnes and Noble or any bookstore, if you're buying a trade paperback, which might be a collection of like 3 or 4 comics for a story arc, you're paying usually around $9 to $12, and that might have around 60 pages. So it's not that far off. But then those are colored, fully produced comics. So I do think that people should pay attention to that too, because that could lead to a feeling of basically that you didn't get the value. Because there's other people creating full color comics, like the first one we talked about, Journey to the Middle Kingdom, which is a full color, fully illustrated, traditional, like comic book look to it, and versus this one. So you get more pages, but you might feel like you're getting less quality. So it's something where, as a creator, I guess when you make your campaign, and luckily he's being very upfront with what he's making and what he's doing. And I would hope that most people putting their crowdfunding out would do the same, because it would be something where people might be very unhappy if they weren't very clear about what they were making there.
No, absolutely. But I would say so. Just kind of summarizing this overall, definitely interesting one to study here, just for how the campaign's being executed. The concept looks pretty interesting. It looks like it'll be pretty good for genre. And to go off of their own description here, right? Creepsters is a loving tribute to 1980s high concept, low budget comedy horror. So it looks like it'll probably be a really fun project for what they're looking to do. And yeah, the way they've combined merchandise into it, we can also tell that they're trying to be as ready to go as they can from the beginning. So yeah, definitely going to be a fun project to see how this turns out. And from what we can see with the numbers so far, it is starting to turn out okay. So, great for these guys. So with that, I guess we'll go ahead. You guys ready to jump for the next one? Because I know especially Joey was excited about this one. And that is
yeah, I'm pretty excited about this one.
Yeah.
I think the cover art is designed to promote that excitement.
I think so. And
You're talking about the 4 arms, right?
The 4 arms. So in this case, the Savage Sasquanaut. So yeah, just discovered this. Thanks to you guys recommending it. And I think, yeah, to scroll down, my favorite fast description of this pitch is Bigfoot plus astronaut is the Sasquanaut. Yeah, you guys want to talk a little bit more about just what the story is, and then we'll jump more into how the offering works or how the campaign's working?
Yeah, I mean, I was reading through the description part of it and kind of got sold immediately when they talked about Star Wars and Jack Burton, and that was all I needed.
Oh, here we go.
Star Wars and Jack Burton.
Yeah, here's our pitch. Are you a fan of Star Trek, Firefly, Farscape, TMNT, and Buck Rogers? Can you imagine Jack Burton from Big Trouble in Little China replacing Luke Skywalker in Star Wars and realize how much better that would be? Now, on the one hand, I'm not necessarily a fan of like using other titles to describe your title, but yeah, Jack Burton as Luke Skywalker that'd be a very different Star Wars for sure.
I see where you're going with that, Mike, about like not wanting to do that. In this case, since the comic is by design seeming to be like a pop culture mashup, it does make sense to kind of sell it that way. It's because it's specifically trying to catch a vibe with lots of references. I'm guessing there's going to be references all throughout the book designed to call back on those things. The one thing that's interesting, so this is issue number 6 that is currently available to Kickstart. It's on Kickstarter, The Savage Sasquanaut. This one is a little more complicated than some of the other ones we looked at because it is in issue number 6. So the options for supporting this one run the gamut from just buying just a pledge without reward, which is pretty standard to offer, to buying the single digital issue, to buying the single print issue, all the way up to basically, because it's got variant covers where you can get a Kickstarter exclusive cover or other alternate covers. But it also has choices for the first 5 issues and in issue 6, where and this is where I think there's an issue where sometimes you can overly complicate your crowdfunding.
Yeah, little bit of decision fatigue happening.
Like within the choices of, if you do the bundle where you can back and get like all the 6 issues, the current 620s funding and the previous 5, but it has alternate versions of each. So it's saying, A, B, or C for issue 1, A, B, or C for issue 2. And it's just, I was very excited to maybe back this one and get the complete bundle. And then I saw this and I was like, oh no, this is making me feel too complicated. And that's something where I think, where as creators, you want to, like, it's something DC and Marvel can do, right? They can do all these variant covers, and it's a great way to make money, right? Variant covers that, the interior of the book is the same, but you can sell it 7 times because people want all the different covers. But you are not in the position to do that. I think you want to keep things simple. Maybe 1 or 2 versions of the cover. Like in this case, they had a Kickstarter exclusive cover and then our standard cover, which I assume is what they'll sell at conventions or to local retail shops if they want to sell it from there.
Yeah.
That's really all you should do. Just have like those 2 choices. And because then as a consumer, when I go to one of these things and choose to crowdfund, I've got an A/B choice of what I'm going to get, and I just go with it. Yep, still scrolling, like going through all the different choices.
Yeah, and when some of the descriptions on these individual pledges are so long that they cannot individually fit on the scroll bar.
I know. Like, here's our $200 tier here.
Like, you're gonna have people that are just like, I don't want to read that. I just wanted to buy it.
What I'm thinking about this too is like the fulfillment side of it, especially when you get to choose between the different A, B, or C's for the covers. Just think about that on the fulfillment side. Like, you have to, like, each box has to be done individually. So I'm thinking about also, right, like the time to pack each box. On like, maybe they've got a system worked out, but you're right, like that is another one that you have to kind of think about it, how they're going to do that for some of these orders.
And where I would say is like, and this is where sometimes the creative person isn't necessarily as business oriented. You want to simplify the decision making for the consumer. You can entice them, but don't make it overly complicated. In this case, if you've got 2 versions of your cover, maybe a Kickstarter exclusive, and then your regular retail cover that you're going to sell forever in the future, you could have a choice where you can get either both of those, one or the other, or in this case, when he's got 5 previous issues, you could either do the Kickstarter exclusive bundle where they're getting all 6 issues of Kickstarter covers, or the retail one where it's all 6 issues of retail. And then let the consumer, if they really want to support it, and this is something comic book people might do, they might get all 6 issues of each, right? Where, but they're buying 1 tier. It's easy to explain. You can put it right on there. You get 6 issues of the Kickstarter exclusive cover, this price. You get 6 issues of the retail cover at this price. And I think Joey put it, kind of nailed it, which is if I have to keep scrolling down and have to friggin' do a calculus equation to try to figure out what I'm purchasing, it's too much, and it's going to make me not, and it's going to make me move on. You need to be making it simple to back your project, and then simple for you to fulfill the project and then do it. Now, maybe this guy, because he's done this now 6 times, is super good at it, and he doesn't really care about the alternate versions of the cover being bundled and mixed and matched and all that different thing. But it seems like it's overly complicating the the business of it, and you shouldn't overly complicate your business.
Yes, for sure. Because I'm thinking the content has got to be really fun. Because with a description like that, they're telling you this is going to be a really fun comic. And but you're right. Like on just the marketing side of it, you always want to reduce friction, and so helping people figure out, okay, like what is my level of buy-in, and then just do it will probably get more people in the door. But at the same time, we also see, okay, so apparently as you go farther down this list of tiers, or maybe with some of the add-ons, they also have some merchandise as well. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff going into this thing for sure. But with that in mind, still just by the numbers. So let's see. So they had a $5,000 goal, and they have beaten that out. So they are being successful. That is for sure. And then the other thing we mentioned about this one, so this one ships January 2022. So it looks like whatever they've got, they are ready to go. So yeah, so it could be an interesting project once you figure out where you want to buy in.
Yeah, and since they're on issue 6, and they've clearly been doing this at a decent clip, it makes me a little more confident that they're actually going to deliver on time. And the fact that they have these retail covers and Kickstarter exclusive covers and all these other variant covers makes me think that there's a strong like retail component where they're creating and selling their books on the traditional comic book store direct market side. So there does seem like that would also support the idea that this is a Kickstarter, or that isn't going to be delayed, that you're likely to get on time. It's already reached its funding goal. It's going to be closing out in about 17 days at the, I guess Friday, November 5th is its end date. So they've already reached it. You're not going to have to worry about that. The fact that they're bundling previous product means they've already got those probably printed and ready to go. So I would be actually very comfortable with the idea that this is going to be fulfilled, and I'm not going to have to worry about not getting my book, which is going to come up in some of our discussion points. So I know some other content we're going to get to later, but that is, and we talked about it last week too. It is the great like thing that always has to come up with these, crowdfunding. The big risk that comes up all the time is, am I actually going to get my comic book? And sometimes there's a lot of people who have a track record that's very poor. So having a track record that so me seeing this for the first time today, and then going to the site and seeing that they're on issue number 6, that they're, having a lot of production, it makes me feel very comfortable that once I decide out of all the massive amount of choices that I have, which thing I might like to do to back it, that I'm going to get the book.
Yes, exactly. So I guess that's how we can kind of sum this one up, that these guys have been doing this for a while. Clearly they've had enough success. They've been able to keep going, and definitely seems like they know what they're doing. And while we had, a little bit of oddity around just all the different tiers and trying to navigate those, it looks like this is a fun project to look at and possibly get behind. So definitely Sasquanaut looks like something fun to check out. All right, cool. So we're going to move ahead. Next one we've got is the Company Men. So this one's an Indiegogo campaign. This one has also met its backing goal. It looks like they're on an in-demand right now, which is another interesting difference between Kickstarter and Indiegogo, that for Indiegogo, you can switch from your fundraiser to an ongoing store once you hit the target date.
Yeah, so it definitely is something that makes Indiegogo a lot more friendly for the creator, if you like, because if you're crowdfunding your book, you're usually, most of the people doing this haven't finished their print file. They haven't gone to the printers and done all that kind of thing ahead of time. And, some of the best ones are at, completed projects. And that's, something we'll talk about. But since most people aren't in that place, up until you send the print file, you can, the idea that you can leave it in demand and just keep like ticking up the numbers that you're going to print at the printers is really good for maximizing your basically profit margin. Because obviously I've mentioned the term overprinting before, I think, in our podcast, but that's when you print more than you need so that you can have inventory. So in this case, the one we're looking at, the company man, says 220 backers right now. So as of now, to get a price point break, he might talk to the printer and say, instead at 200, 20 books, it's, $7 a print run. But if you go to 500 books, it drops down to, $4 so you're saving per unit, but you haven't, got those people out yet. So you'd have just extra inventory sitting there. But if you leave it open in demand and you can pick up more people as you go, that excess print run to get the price per unit to be lowered is covered more and more because you've added more people who are going to buy the book.
Well, yeah, and a lower price per unit means larger profit margins per unit sold. So maybe you don't sell them all during the Kickstarter, but over the next 2 years, if you clear out your inventory, you've essentially made $3 more than you would have if you went with that smaller print batch.
Correct. And as we saw with the last one that we just talked about with the Savage Sasquanaut, which is now on issue 6, where they're bundling previous issues, when you can overprint and drop your price per unit lower, and then use that inventory to make a bundle on a subsequent, book that you're doing, and then you can now bundle those two books together. Your price per unit for that has dropped lower, and your charge of the customer has gone up. So again, you increase your profit margin a second way by doing that bundle. Bundles are one of the best kept secret sauces for people doing crowdfunding. If you can break even and build your audience and deliver on the first one, overprint so you can do a bundle on your second one and actually make more profit, and wash, rinse, repeat as you go, because that way you can address the people who wouldn't, support you normally because feel like, oh, I don't want to go into issue 2 because I haven't read issue 1. Well, hey, there's a bundle for that. You can get issue 1 and 2. And because I overprinted, I'm going to charge $40 for the bundle, but my cost per unit is only going to be, combined like $7 or $8. So I've now made even more profit margin than on the individual for one book.
Again, just looking at some of the different details going through here, because these guys actually did come in and say what is the current status on their books. So now this says as of August 1st, 2021. So presumably they've posted some updates since then. So they're upfront with how far along that they've come, because again, it's this question of when did they
Oh my
fulfill?
gosh, hold on 1 second. Scroll back up. They totally have G.I. Joe style little cards that they made for their characters, and that's awesome. That is the exact like design of the old little G.I. Joe character card that would be on the back of the box that the G.I. Joe would come in. And it makes me want to buy this even more.
That's pretty awesome.
Nice. So that's just one of those nice little touches you try to add for the character immersion, and maybe for if I can get the author for a particular project I've seen recently on one thing they did on their comic book website was they actually had these 1-minute recordings of each character. Those types of immersion are always quite nice.
So one thing I noticed is that they made a point of saying that the PDF version that they are going to be, selling as one of the choices is going to be a DRM free PDF, which is an interesting choice to basically give away your book uncopyright protected in a PDF format. And I don't know how I feel about that, because I do know that piracy is an issue. Now, obviously, with crowdfunding, one of the things people say is, the more people read your book, it's not the better it is for later issues. But I would be wary. It's one of the reasons why, in my thought, when I think about crowdfunding projects that I might want to do, I don't think I'm going to do a digital version at all. I want people to have a print book when they pay for something, but a DRM free full color PDF digital issue, which is $15 right there, strikes me as a recipe to make it easily accessible for piracy. And maybe that's not the biggest deal for them because they're, again, you're just trying to get your content out into the world, and maybe having your characters seen is more important to you. You consider it like maybe marketing costs because someone might turn around and then buy your book after they read it digitally. But it's just awful risky in 2021 for me to think of putting my content out digitally DRM free for anybody to share like in an email.
Well, if you only do it with like the first issue, or and you have subsequent issues that are going to be coming down the pipe, it might be a good way to capture the audience, giving them that easy free access to the start of the story, but then they gotta pay to play as they keep reading further down the line.
Yes, although I do understand your concern though, Vinny, because in my case, out in the web world, this is an ongoing problem for any number of creators, that if people are able to get a hold of the PDF file, DRM or no, there's usually a way then to be able to hack it and then start sharing it around. And there are a number of technologies to try to limit how you can see the images so that it's not as straightforward to pirate. Although granted, if someone is desperate enough, right, there is always a way to figure out how to do it, or at least how to do it well enough to create something shareable if they really wanted to. So you're right, like, that's an interesting risk, but you're right, that could be the point of that exercise, is if a few copies start getting shared widely, maybe it's worth it to them.
And I think that's got to be almost probably a conscious choice. I mean, like I said, it's 2021, making a point, and they're highlighting it very clearly on their Indiegogo that it's DRM free. It's got to be conscious because they're doing it, super blatantly. So my guess is they've done the equation.
They want people to share it.
That they want to get out there, that it's basically like if it gets shared around, it's just going to increase the knowledge of their characters. Now that could be because they're pushing for, I know this is something that comes up with a lot of creators. If the more buzz that you get, maybe you're going for a Netflix deal, or you're doing something like that where you're trying to pitch it for
or if you've got the Creepsters thing where you've got a whole bunch of merch that you're trying to sell, that's an option too, right? Like, okay,
Yes,
the comic is going to sell the merch, so we want the comic to get disseminated to the widest possible audience, because then people will come buy the plushies.
Which is why I think it's interesting, since I stopped Mike immediately to point out the GI Joe style card back that they were making. It does, maybe that's one of their thoughts on it too, is like these could be toys that we could, because in the old days, right, why was there a He-Man cartoon? Why was there a GI Joe cartoon? They were ads for toys. That's
because those stories needed to be told, damn it.
That's true. I mean, the mass device and all the rest of the GI Joe stories that absolutely had to be told. But so maybe that is one of their plans. I mean, it does seem like a pretty slick campaign. It looks like they've got people who are good at making these kinds of things. Nowadays with 3D printers, it's not crazy to be able to basically create and fulfill your own toys. You could, if you do a 3D render of the characters, print and sell and distribute the toys on your own at home, and it could be a good way to make money that way, because you can't digitally send out a toy. It has to be something that you create and send out. So that's an interesting thought. Maybe that's what they're doing.
Yes, indeed. And as you notice, there was one point in this episode I suddenly got engrossed in just like reading their sample comic and thinking, man, I really like this. So yeah, I may go ahead and pony up for a digital after this episode. So yeah, definitely.
Well, since you pony up for it, you can share it with me and Joey, since it's DRM free. And
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that.
I mean, to think about that, I mean, that's what you're facing. I mean, clearly, like right now, you're our friend. We talk all the time. Like this, you'd be like, this book is great. I love it. And I was like, well, is it there? Oh, here, let me just send it to you. It's going to happen. It's, it's not like in the old days where if you wanted someone to, you'd have to loan them your comic book and risk never getting it back. Right. Then you'd be like, nah, maybe you can just look at it when you're over at my house. But in this case, it's like, here, let me attach it to my email and I'll just send you, the PDF of the book. It's, it's awesome. It's here it is. Read it and enjoy.
Yeah, but banking on that, like, okay, the digital copy gets shared out. I really like it. Now I want to have it on my shelf.
Yeah, you're making a choice that basically you're banking on the collector mentality and the fact that honestly digital sucks. I mean, I know
Yeah.
there's people who only do their comic books digital now, and I've got some digital comic books, and it's fine, it's convenient. You can have it all on a tablet, but it's
Just admit it. You think those people are plebs.
I think you lose something when you don't physically hold the book and read it and kind of and get a tactile sensation when you're also reading, and like you want to have more senses involved. Like there's also like, and it's weird to say this up, but for a lot of people who collected comic books when they were younger, there's a newsprint smell that
Yes, there
goes
is.
along with the comic books you used to get. And so I have very vivid memories of reading the books, but and also like the smell of the book, as like the Infinity Gauntlet, like the famous comic book series. I remember holding that, reading it. It had the like newsprint smell as you were reading it too, because it was fresh, print like newspaper style print before they went to the glossy pages that kind of lost that a little bit. And so there's something like to actually trying to involve your reader in the most senses possible when they're reading your book. If you want touch, you want sight, you want smell. I mean, that's 3 out of 5 senses, being involved
Make
with
it
your,
4 because the sound that a page makes when you
oh
turn
yeah,
it is very
yeah,
different than the sound that your screen makes when you slide your finger on it.
which
Okay.
is interesting because sometimes some of the programs will make an artificial like page turning sound to try to simulate that.
Yep.
I don't know if you guys have seen that too, where like you hit the button and it turns, but it makes the whoosh noise like your page is turning.
Yes,
I
it
think,
does. And the other thought I had about that too, and you mentioned this for digitals, because we're gonna have the iconic guys coming up on our next piece for this. It turns out that for one kind of review I'm looking to do, and that was for Kamen America X Black Ops, I went ahead and got the digital for Black Ops so that I could, just get the background information on that series. And because I had the print for one and digital for the other, I'd say the other thing that stuck out to me as well was that the PDF was done, or at least like my program rendered it as just a series of individual pages. And as you know, when you read it in that format compared to the page turning, one of the big things that you lose is turning the page into a surprise, which a good writer, right, always takes advantage of that because they know like the way you're going to look at the page or at the book is part of the experience. And you're right. And you do lose that with the digital. So the result is for that other series that I was only digital, like I just speed read through it in like maybe an hour or so, just like trying to digest the pages as fast as possible. And it was a very different experience from the Kamen America series, which I read as the actual books. So yes, that is true.
so I would caution most creators doing this to build, when you're building the loyalty, and having a physical book is going to be more beneficial to you than the digital one. If you really feel like you want to give away that digital copy and you're committed to it, do it. That's fine. I would think that the model to really move to is to just abandon a digital copy completely and only actually fulfill physical merchandise and physical books. Because honestly, if you're not, because Amazon owns Comixology now, they're integrating it into the Kindle service. And would imagine that in the next few years, like that's going to be the home of pretty much the mainstream comic digital realm. And if you're not on there, people aren't going to want to read your book because they're going to be used to the system that they, Comixology through Amazon has. So I would just don't play the game. Like create your own game, right? Like do it the old way, do it physical, like do a
Well, and
physical
that's
media.
part of the problem right there, isn't it? Like, yes, I agree. I like that tactile sensation. I like the sound the pages make when I turn them. I like the smell of the new print. Even to this day, you go into a library and you can smell the books, and there's a nostalgia to that isn't going to be a nostalgia for this younger generation. Like from the get-go, they've had Kindles.
Yeah. And And that does change how some of the merchandising is going to work for sure. And the other thought I had too, for myself being kind of the guy getting into comics recently, just my stance on this is if I buy digital, it's because I am less committed than people I buy physical from.
Yeah, digital is how you get a taste.
Yeah, it's pretty much like I just want to see what the content is and decide like, do I want to go further with this author or not? Yeah, it's like if you want to just like have like kind of like a cheap way for people to preview your work, you can. But you are right, like serious fans are gonna buy physical goods. And then that kind of like helps us transition over to the iconic titles because iconic comics, what's also interesting too is how quickly they moved to hardcovers, because one of the things they realized with that was hardcovers, those go on bookshelves, right? Your floppies, your saddle stitched ones go into long boxes where they can very quickly disappear. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and do that transition over to our two iconic comics titles. So the first one is Arc Athena. And you notice also we are now stepping up an order of magnitude in the fundraising amounts here. So this is a relatively new addition to the iconic comics listed titles. I've seen the pitch. So yeah, Eric Canete is the artist. He's a really great artist. And what happens is there are two groups of superheroes, Arc Athena and Arc Poseidon. And so one of them is more for show. The other one is the more serious getting stuff done. And apparently there is some type of rivalry that goes on in this story that I would have to go in and check out. Very interesting setup here. And just kind of going back up here by the numbers. Let's see. So this one is finished. And they ended up doing really well on their goal, getting 55,000 on this. And I know that
once again they had a $500
Yeah,
goal.
when you've got an
$500 goal.
11,000% of your goal.
Yeah, you know, I think there's got to be something that ties into the algorithm for this as well. That
Well, I don't know if it's not just the algorithm; it's also the psychology. Like when you are a customer, you know, and you see that something is 100% backed, you have less hesitation. There's like, oh, I'm not worried.
You know you're going to get your
I
product.
know I'm going to get the product because they've backed it at 100%. And so with something like that at $500, they know guaranteed day one their book is going to list as funded. And from there, you know, obviously the algorithm with Indiegogo or Kickstarter or wherever is going to look at that and say it's a funded, it's met its goal. Maybe we'll pump it up on the algorithm because it's an actual, you know, one that's met its goal. But I think there's also a human psychology component where when you click on something and you see that it's already been successfully funded, sometimes you don't look at what the original goal was, right? You know, maybe, you know, we are because we're paying close attention. But if you don't see that it was $500 and you just see that it was 100% funded and now it's like thousands of dollars or something like that, you might think that its goal was like $20,000 and now it's funded, right? You're not looking at the percentage or those other numbers. You just see the green bar completely full that says funded.
Well, and if you get into some of the even more granular psychology of it, if you look at something and their goal is 5,000 and so far they've made $80. Well, I don't know if this is going to meet its goal. I'll throw $5 at it. But if its goal is 5,000 and it's made 17,000 already, I'll be like, oh, what do I get if I go to this bigger package? Ooh, I want that package. And suddenly I spend 50 instead of 5.
Yep. Because risk is a big part of it. And also speaking of risk, because I saw this mentioned around on Twitter, but yeah, they also mentioned right in here. So when it comes to their artwork, 5 out of 6 issues are already finished, because this was just for issue 1, by the way. They're not doing the in-demand game, and they said delivery in 4 months. So they're just telling you straight up, we are funded. We have already produced the book, and you will get it within this time frame, which Iconic is great about meeting their delivery goals. So when they say it, I believe it.
Now, the only downside to what they're doing with right here for Arc Athena, you know, because I've gotten some of the Iconic books and I started getting the individual Kamen Americas, and now I'm getting the omnibus for the new one that's out, which we'll talk about shortly.
In just a moment. Yep.
Yeah. But when I see this and I see that it's going to be, you know, one issue, the first issue, right? But I know that they've collected and done omnibus editions now. As a collector, I've got a lot of shelf space that it's taken up. What it did for me is it made me decide, and this is something I'm interested to see if other people may have thought the same way. I'm going to wait and I'm going to do the 6-issue omnibus that they're clearly going to make. Instead of doing one in, the individual ones, I'm going to wait and get all of them collected, because I don't want to have to keep getting the individual ones and taking up more space than I need to when I can get the collected one. And maybe that doesn't bother them because they know a certain percentage of people are still going to buy the individual issues or try it first before they commit to it. But since I already know their content is great and I like it, I'm gonna wait and purchase it at the end at I guess crowdfunding number 6 for it, where it's gonna have all of them together.
Yeah, exactly. And that's an interesting point for kind of the game here, that some people may be strategic and say, hey, I'm going to wait for the omnibus to come out. And others may say, no, I want to see the issues now. And you're right, those are some of the decisions you have to make kind of from the beginning when you're ready to put your own Kickstarter out there.
I will say, kind of just going off the beaten path, just at a glance here, looking at the whole thing, I'll probably wait and see what you guys think, because I really like the art style, but I'm not sold on the character design. Like that main character, I can't stand that hair.
You know, it's funny that's the exact same way I feel as well. There's probably a very particular ethos or world that they've built for this.
It looks kind of like they're going for a cyberpunky aesthetic, which is cool. I just don't know why the cyberpunk world always involves stupid hair.
No, I get you, dude. Because that's always the question about the character relatability. But
look, I'm just gonna be honest. And like 20 years ago, I don't know, I was watching like cyberpunky style stuff, and I'd see like the shaved half head things. And I was like, that's so stupid. No one's gonna have haircuts like that in the future.
And now everybody does.
And now everybody does. And I was like, oh my God, they were actually right. You can go back and watch Johnny Mnemonic and some of the other ones. And you're like, crap. They aside from thinking mini discs were going to be the thing of the future, or Back to the Future 2, when they were doing fax machines everywhere, they nailed a lot of other stuff, and it's kind of sad. And you're like, oh, because you're like, how silly and stupid they're making, and it's a joke because people are going to dress like that, and it's no, and they do, they actually.
But the question is, would they have if not for the literature and the media that
put the idea into their head?
Yeah, like they'd say, I mean, science fiction is just the precursor to science fact. So,
well, my thought there, of course, is science fiction. Part of the idea is a lot of those books are just speculation on, like, once technology gets to this level, what are people going to do with it? And yeah, sometimes those speculations are correct, and sometimes, right, they're like hilariously off. But you're right, that is the point of science fiction.
And sometimes NASA watches 2001: A Space Odyssey and realizes, oh, that's how we should build our space station and things like that, because they're like, oh, these guys actually did that. So yeah, it's interesting when the people who become science fiction writers are also what they are, futurists, right? And that's where they are they creating the ideas, or are they channeling what would happen? Like, that's a good concept, but totally different podcast episode for that one.
Yeah, that already sounds like an interesting podcast episode. We're gonna have to get that one queued up. All right, so this was the first of the 2 iconic ones. So again, I do think it is really great artwork, of course. Some interesting questions exactly about how they're structuring the campaign, but by the numbers, they definitely succeeded. Definitely had a good fundraiser. And knowing how Iconic does it, these will now probably be available off their website if you're looking for them. So let's go to their active campaign, though. So Kamen America, Volume 4, and the 4-issue omnibus. So let's see here. So they have raised 138,000, 2,900 backers. And this one in particular stuck out to me because remember, I was watching a documentary on Image Comics, and they were talking about, if you think of like big mainstream comics houses, once you're getting into like a few thousand up to 10,000, like you're starting to approach mainstream numbers. And I know you, Vinny, when we were talking about this beforehand, you were saying, especially in the case of the omnibus here, which is, I think, their equivalent of a trade paperback, to sell 3,000 is like a really big accomplishment.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically top 10, top 5 sales. I think there's a website called Comicron where they usually have the sales figures just to kind of be as accurate as possible. And obviously, I want to take manga out of it because there's going to be a lot of people who will say that well, manga just decimate. Yes, manga decimates all of them. It's, you know, so we've got to completely just not even consider manga in the equation because it's so, like, Demon Slayer on its own, I believe, outsells all of North American comic books.
I think
So,
not only does it
Yeah.
outsell as the number one, but I think there's a couple other Demon Slayer prints that are also in the top 10. Like, I don't think it's just one Demon Slayer issue.
But you're like,
yeah.
I think like Demon Slayer like outsells like the entire market for sure. But still, what's interesting about this though is that these numbers indicate that, just like you were saying earlier with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and funny enough, Timothy Lim got his start doing cover art for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. These are the guys, like, they may actually be creating what will become one of the new mainstream titles if they continue to grow their business, which when I listen to these guys on their podcast, they have been very deliberate and methodical about doing exactly that.
All right, so I've pulled up, and as last month, the top selling graphic novels to stores were around 4 or 5 thousand. And again, there's a lot of manga in this, Berserk and other things. So I'm trying to, like, take the titles out. Like Demon Slayer sold 5,000 units, and I mean, so, you know, when you take those out, like the actual, like, standard, like, comic book fare, where it's not like, you know, JoJo's Bizarre Adventures or things like that. Like, so Heroes Reborn, which was a Marvel's big thing, you know, selling, you know, sold like 2,500 units. That's like Marvel's main event, you know, big deal. House of X, Powers of X, which is, you know, X-Men title, big thing, 2,400 units. These are less units than Common America is doing, which is also a 30-day window, right? So, you know, you're comparable sales wise to, by far, like, and you got to think about the just overall cultural push for those things. Like, it's X-Men, right? They are selling as many units as the X-Men trade paperback, collecting like the last, you know, story arc of the major X-Men, you know, stuff for the year. And they're actually outselling it. Now,
Yeah.
I mean, I know people will like, well, they also sold the individual books and things, you know, whatever. I think that we can't minimize the accomplishment. And number two, we can't also, I think, you know, even what I just did, comparing it to DC and Marvel, is a disservice because they are successful to such a degree in their own right that we don't really need to compare it. They've sold, currently it's $138,000 in sales, 2,900 roughly backers, with about 6 days left to go.
And that's without the backing of a giant multi-million dollar corporate entity.
Correct. And that's
Yeah.
also without the overhead of the giant multi-billion dollar corporate entity. Right
Exactly.
now,
Their
we're
marketing department is Mark Pellegrini out there, like, pounding the pavement on Twitter every day. Like, I interact with that guy so much.
Kicking
so
ass and taking
yeah.
names.
So if you think about it, like, say out of that $138,000, take $38,000 away for production costs, and that's actually, I think, really high. But, you know, just to be, you know, just for, you know, whatever, $38,000, because there's going to be fees to Kickstarter, there's going to be production on the book, there's going to be fulfillment where they have to, you know. Now here's the other thing: when you do Kickstarter or an Indiegogo, the charges for shipping don't show up in that pledged part, so the people are paying for the shipping part separate. So that shouldn't actually impact and come out of your cost. Maybe the handling if you do a fulfillment service, but I think these guys do it themselves. So, you know, just say that's a wash. But say, like, again, let's use just for math, let's be super aggressive in what their costs are and say it's $38,000. That means two people, Tim Lim and Mark Pellegrini, are basically getting $50,000 each by, you know, they're splitting 100. There is not anyone in DC or Marvel who's working as a writer or an artist who's getting $50,000 a book, which is what they just got. And
Exactly.
if they do this, if they do Common America, say 2, 3 times a year, or I think they're alternating with Black Hops. So say
Yep.
they get 3 Common Americas and 3 Black Hops out over the course of the year, just 6 books, books made, and they're making that amount roughly each time. That is what, that's 300, grand a year take home.
I
I
mean,
mean,
that's a very nice full-time job. I mean, a third of that is a nice full-time job.
yeah, and that is something that nobody is getting paid but like the Brian Michael Bendises of the Marvel and DC world. I guarantee you, the top tier artists are the only people maybe sniffing that, and that's only if they're like an ultimate name. They're not, even the artists that are working really regularly are not making that much. And I can tell you, because those guys are still going to conventions, they're still doing commissions. And if you
Yep.
are making 300 grand a year as an artist, you are not doing commissions anymore. I mean, Alex Ross doesn't do commissions, right? But like David Finch does, So just
Yep.
to kind of give an example on why I think we have to change what we think of as a success metric, because this is what it is to be free and sovereign on your own right. Like, you can make your own content, you can sell it yourself, and you can take home the money earned yourself, and you don't have to give it to anybody else. And these are characters they own. These are not characters that Marvel or DC own, that Marvel and DC will sell the rights to making movies on. This is,
They can't be muscled out of their own projects.
yep. When they
Yep.
make Kamen America merchandise, when they throw that content into a swimsuit calendar or a statue, with all the anime guys getting their waifu top tier support systems activated.
Which we'll cover in a second. Yep.
This is all money going right to these guys.
This is what we call living the dream.
It is. And the thing about it is, if you look over the history of these projects, because I think the first one was in the range of like 12 to 20,000. And even then they had been out just pounding the pavement at conventions for a while back then. This is back for issue 1. The thing about it is, like, you can see this steady exponential growth because, right, they have been methodically building a fan base. They've been methodically perfecting their craft. I recently saw Tim Lim had posted part of the main character's growth arc from like issue 1 to something she says in the Kamen America X Black Ops. And what's interesting is you look at the art quality of those 2 issues, and you can even see how much the guy's grown over the 3 years. So again, I mean, it's a case study of guys who are doing it really well. They're being quite successful. And you're right, like, it's not just units sold, although what's nice about units sold is that's also a measure of cultural impact. Because I'll tell you, this weekend, I was out visiting my little brother, and it was his birthday, and he liked comics. So you know what? I brought him my soft covers that I had collected out of this series now to Soul Finder. Because again, right, that is your cultural impact, is these books getting into more hands and influencing the readers.
And that's that's the way to do it. You get successive growth, and they're bundling so that people can get on board and not feel like they're missing anything out. They're doing things right in terms of customer service and fulfillment. The only thing I'd say is I think they should get out of digital entirely, but we just kind of covered that whole deal.
Well,
And
they're getting out of digital, actually.
Oh, they are?
Yeah, I think Kamen America X Black Ops is the last one, either that one or this one.
Yeah, but you did make a good point, because I was interested in this and have been interested in this for a while, but I missed the first 2 and kind of started hearing about it when the third one was going around. And I was like, but I don't have the first 2. So then this omnibus package came out, and I was like, well, there we go. That's perfect. That's what I'll get.
And then also, since I'm starting to look at the details here. So yeah, so you mentioned about the $500 thing again. So yeah, funded in under 30 seconds. I will say this, I was one of the first guys. I got on there in like the first 5 minutes, and the speed at which this thing blew up was crazy. Yeah, I remember watching this thing go to 30K on the first hour, because yeah, like, these guys had been pumping it. They had a really excited fan base that a whole bunch of guys rushed right in. And we'll also go over some of the things people picked up at that time.
I didn't fund it till today when I found out that there was a calendar.
Well, I mean, that's
Just,
part of the job of this podcast, right? Is promoting these Kickstarters. So we promoted it in-house.
So just be careful when you open the packaging. So when I got my very first Kamen America, and they sent the calendar with it, my wife, is with me. I ordered a book, and I had forgotten about the calendar. And I open up the little packaging, and what is sitting out there is in their last swimsuit calendar. There's a very nice image of a girl in like a hot spring style thing, as our anime fans are going to be aware of how they usually frame that. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's just a calendar. We'll put that to the side, please. But it's a good book. It's completely legitimate. It's
Have
like,
you met my wife? She'll like the calendar as much as I do.
This is another thing they mentioned too, because we're talking about issues and sales and such. Yeah, here are apparently some of the rankings here. So some of their earlier volumes made it to the Amazon top 100 graphic novels ranking. So here you see Kamen America ranked next to Watchmen and Suicide Squad. So
And I mean, so for something that barely existed a year ago, that is a strong showing for just coming out of nowhere like that.
it is. It really is. It's a combination of both good business practice, which we're going to look at the tiers in a moment, combined with good artwork, combined with, right, people are just hungry for good stories, and these guys tell a good story.
So not to knock their nice promotion, but if you scroll back up, #1 bestseller in 90-minute comic and graphic novel short reads. I mean, I do feel like there's a little bit of a like
Game being played here.
Yeah, like how many different like let me get my subcategories down to the point where I'm the #1. Like it is the #1 manga style American made comic book written by an author named Timothy.
You know, there's some sort of AI in the background that's trying to figure out different ways to categorize everything so that it can make the most granular metrics as it possibly can come up with to sell you things. That's why that category exists.
So what comes to mind is, and I think it was it John Candy in Rookie of the Year, or the movie when he's like, he leads the league in doubles in domes on Tuesdays. Like because it was like, okay, well now I know he's definitely the guy. Like it was making a joke of like how the baseball guys will have that random like stat within a stat within a stat to like try to make it seem like it's a really involved decision on why somebody's doing something.
The one I love is, and I was the only guy to ever take off his skate and try to stab somebody.
I was going to say, well, we had to find something to critique on every single one of these, right? So there we go. We found our critique for this one.
Well, I mean, I don't even disagree with putting it out there. I mean, it makes
because
it says it's got a big #1 bestseller written on there. I mean, it's somebody like,
to be honest, you don't read the rest of it. That's why they put that in the fancy color bar, because you'll read #1 bestseller and be like, oh, it's a #1 bestseller.
Yeah. But I still like how they did it over here too, to show like some of the people they're ranking against, because again, I mean, cultural impact, like these are household names, especially Spider-Man, and like they are ranking on that side. I mean, this is the definition of success on multiple levels. Now, also take a moment and look at the tiers. So it looks like they are doing digital copies. I remember them talking about they may be changing how they're doing digital because there are a lot of logistics issues around this. But again, I would defer to whatever they end up doing. So we'll see.
I just like the way they've laid out their different tiers a lot better, because there's a little write-up on exactly what you're getting, but you can also go down to the includes and just see, okay, digital copy volume 4, physical copy volume 4. Cool. That works. It's quick. It's easy. I don't get decision fatigue going through it.
Exactly. And so other thing I noticed here too, looking at the prices, so this 25 or more for the omnibus, because each of these, 240 pages of story. So yeah, this is a 200, almost 250 page graphic novel, like 10 cents a page. That's an extremely good deal. And they mentioned, like, if you go out and follow these guys, they'll get out on podcasts and they'll mention like they're intentional about getting prices down. But you're right. They also take into account the international, because I've done international shipping and that stuff is not cheap. But going further, you're right. There's the swimsuit calendar, and now we're starting to get into the combos, but they're still not overly complicated because they don't do the variant covers on this one. And then, of course, the statue pledge, which that did sell out in less than 1 minute because there were only 8 of them. And I think, Vinny, you were the one who said that you explained like why it is that these statues apparently carry a lot of value for the collecting community.
Look, I've said the word waifu several times, and you dudes who love anime, Love
I'll give you an
statues.
example for just random example. I used to
Mhm.
have a statue of Faye Valentine from Cowboy Bebop, and
Yep.
it got old and it fell apart, and I was sad. So I went to look for a replacement.
It just got old there, Joey.
It just got old.
There was nothing else involved. Okay.
It was
Okay.
well loved. Shut up. But no, it just got old and fell apart. So I went to try and find a replacement. That statue, which at the time I bought for $20 at like a movie store or a video game store somewhere, just on impulse, now sells for about $1,200.
Wow.
They don't not all collectible plates have gone up in value, but some collectible plates. I mean, it's just
I get the distinct impression that if Kamen America stays on the path it's on, all those things will shoot through the roof in value eventually.
Yeah, I'm holding on to my hardcovers for sure. But I also remember too something they had early on with the sketch cards that also sold out real fast. And the funniest thing is, I think it was Badger actually sold out the fastest because for some reason everybody really likes the capybara.
capybaras are incredibly adorable creatures. I mean, they should be like a squirrel girl of capybaras is what they should really have.
Well, they are bringing back who was it, Marmot Maiden for Kamen America 5. So not sure if you heard about that.
Well, it's basically such a giant riff on Squirrel Girl and what Marvel did to her. It's to comic book people, it's a hilarious in joke. But when they're gonna make I mean, for a little while, people really liked Squirrel Girl because they drew her attractive and did nice, and it was a funny, goofy character that was also drawn attractive, and it was fine. And then they made her special, super special, and people were done at that point. But so it's the Common America is following the trend, which is it's an aesthetic art. People like aesthetics that look nice. The main comic book buying audience is male. If you start checking the boxes on what aesthetically pleasing male audience, how should we draw things, then yes, this is exactly how you should design and draw your characters. And it's no surprise that swimsuit calendars and other things that get bundled in with it are just nice add-ons that people appreciate. And then when you make a three-dimensional like anime style statue of really attractive Common America, it sells out in 2 minutes, maybe less than 2 minutes, even at $600.
And the only thing that sells out faster than hot girls?
I don't know, because OnlyFans kind of covered that territory pretty fast.
No, I was segueing into our next project.
Oh,
Yes.
The only thing that sells out faster than hot girls is manly men.
Yes. This gets to our last one. Yes. Rainbow the Brute. So this was one of Ethan Van Scriver's campaigns. So
he's
nearly
the last
half a
real
million.
man in fairyland.
So in the same way that because as we know from Common America, Carly Vanders is a very obvious reference to Carol Danvers. So kind of doing Miss Marvel the right way. And same way Marmot Maiden and Squirrel Girl and all these other connections here. Ethan Van Scriver had a very interesting concept along the same thing, that as the last real man in fairyland, we take the very feminine concept. And what was the one that this is based off again?
Rainbow Bright.
Rainbow Bright.
Rainbow Bright. He decided to take feminine cartoons of the 80s. Yep. And basically the way that current culture is kind of flipping the script and feminizing things that were masculine, he decided to make masculine the things that were feminine. So he took Rainbow Bright and converted him to Rainbow the Brute, which is a big like Viking-y, like warrior style guy.
According to the write-up here, he is a hard fighting, hard drinking fairy barbarian who battles the thundercloud men and maintains order under the rainbow.
Yep. And which
Kami elves and Onion Grove children.
What's really nice is he also my favorite part, mount up on Rainbow's girthy stallion, because he's making the joke of, instead of My Little Pony, it's My Girthy Stallion. which,
And of course, choke slam a unicorn. And here we've got
No, that's an
the
obvious Shira
Shira
reference.
which is supposed to
igniting the
be his
bonds
son,
between
yeah,
father and soy.
instead of son. So it's
Yes.
so the downside of this one is it launched in January of 2021. It
Yep.
supposedly has an estimated ship date of December 2021. It is nowhere near that. Ethan Van Sciver does run long on his campaigns. He does not fulfill them immediately, and part of that's because he says that it takes really he does really detailed art and like super amazing work, but he's still working on his next cyber fraud project, which was crowdfunded before this one, I believe. um,
Yep.
and so I think that one will come first, and then comes Rainbow Brute. So the risk with this one is just I have no thought that it won't be fulfilled. I don't worry that Ethan Van Sciver will actually fulfill the project. The question is just how long it's going to take. So if you're like really excited about it but want it immediately, you're not going to get it then. Now, on the other hand, if you're willing to just kind of support it for the fun project that it's going to be when it does eventually get to you, probably next year would be my guess. I think he's going to finish Cyber Frog at the end of / beginning of this year, and he'll finish Rainbow Brute after that into middle, probably I would think middle or third quarter of 2022 is when I would actually guess that it would ship. If you're okay with that, and that's one of the downsides of crowdfunding, then I would 100% support it. I mean, I backed it. It looked like a funny book. I just the concept just made me want to do it. But it's that. Now, one interesting thing that Ethan Van Sciver does that some other people don't, and you'll see it on the screen now as we're scrolling, is the original line art. So one thing
Yes.
Ethan does is he actually draws the physical page, because he's and now that's partly because when he started as a comic book artist, that was the standard way of doing it. But one thing that Ethan Van Sciver promotes to a lot of the artists working is to make the physical pages, because it's a great secondary market for them as artists to sell that later as the original art, because you can sell original art for a very high amount if it's a popular book. I mean, pages will go for hundreds to thousands of dollars.
I mean, right
That's
here,
another
thousand
thing I used
dollars.
to do
Yeah.
was buy like I would drop a pretty penny on actual drawn up cell arts from various animes that I used to watch. And I mean, it's not the coolest quality, but it was something exclusive. It's something that not everybody's gonna get.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So if you're talking about like a 20 to 24 page comic, there's going to only be 22 pages drawn, and there's only going to be one of that page. So like page one, there's only going to be one Bristboard hand drawn physical page when it's all done. So there is something exclusive to that. There's something collectible to that, and there is a very big market for that. Now, one of the things that's come up is a lot of the artists got pushed into doing things digitally. Now, a lot of the younger artists really like drawing digital because it is very forgiving. You can, do layers on Adobe and all or whatever program you use. And if there's an issue, you just take out that one layer and you haven't ruined your entire page that you've been working on.
Yep.
But it does take away from the fact that outside of doing some NFTs, which is, the modern crypto market for artwork, which a lot of people are still just getting into, you really don't have a way to sell your JPEG or PNG file or whatever file version you made it, because it's unlimited. So then you might make a limited print run, but then that's, a customer has to trust that you're not going to make a new version of that print anytime you need to make money. So there's all sorts of reasons why financially for artists, learning how to draw physical is a great way to give themselves an inventory of a portfolio work that you can sell for a good value later. So that's something, if anybody listens who's like doing the artwork for comics, I would say, work on doing the physical stuff. And at the very least, if you're drawing a book and you're doing the cover, do the cover as physical art so that you can sell that later, because that is the thing that sells for the most is cover art. So you should at the very least look to do that physical so you have that to sell.
I think so. And that's something you don't see it, you didn't see it up front. It was an add-on for the previous campaign. But I know that's also people have done the sketch pads and sketch covers as well. But you're right though, for the original art, like you saw what it goes for on this one. I know on Iconic Comics, the guys doing Soul Finder, they also have the original artwork that you can get pages for. And that is, I mean, it's something very special. And it's the fact that the author took the individual time for what you're holding. Just that's what makes these things quite special for you. And again, just looking at the numbers, both the amount and also the number of backers. Once again, we see at least a couple of guys here, as well as some potential upcoming people in the future, that they are breaking away from the mainstream. They are ascending above the mainstream, and they are having success both in terms of being able to make money at what they do, that their project ranges everything from on the low end, just funding itself, to the higher end of being a very lucrative opportunity for some of these artists. And finally, too, again, just like by the numbers for the number of people backing, we are approaching mainstream numbers, which means we're talking about actual cultural impact. So I really do think we are really right at that inflection moment of history where we are starting to see really the people that we're going to talk about the same way we talk about Marvel and DC, like those kind of names are going to become that level of influential, I think, over the course of this generation. And it's a really fascinating thing to watch it happen in real time in the numbers on these campaigns right now.
Hopefully, I mean, I would love for these independent creators to be able to, really be the ones that win. I feel like they're on track to do it, because it's not like it hasn't happened before. I mean, Ninja Turtles sold for billions of dollars not too long ago, and that was from Eastman and Laird, two just guys making a goofy comic book about mutant Ninja Turtles, right? And so the idea that Common America couldn't be something as big as that is just actually crazy the other way. It's happened enough times that it's totally possible. Now, whether people will be strong enough to continue the pursuit and hold on and do the things necessary to create those conditions for success is different. I would say that somebody like, again, Ethan Van Sciver, who's got the big head start, he's collecting more on his projects than the Common America guys, but he's declining in that, like, Rainbow Brute is making less than Cyberfrog, and the Cyberfrog action figures made less than Rainbow Brute so far. At least they've got a little bit longer to go. And part of that makes, and I do think that part of the reason is just fulfillment. You've got to fulfill your stuff in a timely manner or you lose the momentum. And the one thing that the Iconic Comic people have done better than anybody in crowdfunding is fulfilled timely and kept the momentum going. And that's why they have, steady, progressively increasing growth, which is the exact kind of model you would want running a business. You don't want to pop and then decline. You want steady growth that you can plan on and build from. So I'm really excited to see what they're going to do. I mean, Arc Athena is going to be a good example of what they can do as they branch out beyond Common America. The fact that the first one of that series made 55-ish, I think, when we were looking at it. And I mean, the key is going to be when we get to the second volume of that, if it increases again, did we retain the audience and then grow further? And if they did that with something that isn't Common America, and Soul Finder continues to grow, and that's another one they do. If they have three distinct franchises that are all on steady growth, that would be a sign that they're really the ones who are probably winning the independent contest.
Yes, absolutely. And on top of that, too, I'm not sure if you heard that they have yet another title, Long Harbor, that they brought in. Now, that one is just going direct to market, just like Soul Finder did. I do know that it had sold quite a bit, though. And that is one of the interesting things to watch for these is both who are the individually successful campaigns like we saw today, but also over time, like who is consistently growing their business. Because you're right, like it has to get to a certain critical mass, a certain amount of momentum to see what we're really looking for, which is ascendant art and ultimately ascendant cultural impact.
Well, one of the things I like best so far is the transparency. So the fact that they've continued to put their projects on the crowdfunding sites, you obviously don't get an idea of what they're selling through their website, but what you can see is what they've sold in, for each campaign, and that they've increased. So I think there's a lot being done right now to obscure and obfuscate what the sales actually are at DC and Marvel and some of the other book places, the mainstream comic books. So the idea that we actually get transparency with people who are open to letting you see how their projects are being successful and to what level is a really good sign for hopefully something I mean, I like from the business side is just seeing which creators and content people are actually being successful. It's really helpful for planning your own projects that you want to put out there. So I really appreciate that, and I'll be very sad to see if they eventually switch away from doing that, which I could see them doing if they're getting big enough where they can run it through their own business and not have to take fees off the top. I do think that they are continuing to do the crowdfunding just more as a access and advertising kind of buzz generating system and still make money. So I'm going to be intrigued to see how long they stick with that model, or versus maybe transitioning all to their own platform.
Yes, absolutely. So I think we can go ahead and wrap the episode here then. But again, it's really impressive to see all the things that are going on out there. Just the opportunities as these projects keep moving on. I will be glad to talk to you guys next week.
Yep.
Later, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.